the meditation of our hearts together be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. A couple of months ago, I preached on Ruth chapter 1. And then the last time I preached, I didn't preach on Ruth chapter 2. And so Bart said, what happened to Ruth chapter 2? So this is Ruth chapter 2. To begin, I'm going to tell the story of Ruth chapter 1, except I'm going to put it in an imaginary context of today. Let's imagine a certain Saskatchewan-born man and woman and their 2 teenage sons moved to India because of a good job opportunity. And after a number of years, the 2 sons fall in love with 2 Indian-born young women and get married. And a number of years go by, and this family of 6, mother, father, 2 sons, 2 daughters-in-law, become close, and they did many things together. And another few years went by when all 3 men died suddenly. The father first, and then the 2 sons. So now there was this interracial group of widows, all living in India. There was the Saskatchewan-born, middle-aged woman and her 2 Indian-born daughters-in-law. So it came to pass that the mother-in-law decided she wanted to return to Saskatchewan and told her 2 daughters-in-law that they should stay in India. In her mind, it made perfect sense for them to stay. After all, India was their homeland. They knew their culture, their language, they knew the way things worked, and besides, they had families who would support them even though they were widows. Their mother-in-law used this logic to try and persuade her daughters-in-law to stay. They were close. They all cried together as they thought about their situation and the choice that was before them. Why would you want to go with me to Saskatchewan? The mother-in-law asked. After much further discussion and crying, one of the daughters-in-law decided to stay. But the other one said, no way. I'm going with you to Saskatchewan, and your people will be my people. Now that's the story of Ruth in a modern context. So you can imagine a Saskatchewan-born woman coming here and living with her daughter-in-law who's East Indian. She's an immigrant. What is that daughter-in-law going to do in this society? It's all strange to her. Well, in the story from the Bible, it is Naomi, an Israelite woman, that's the mother-in-law. And she has persuaded her daughter-in-law, Orpah, to stay in Moab and to find help through her own Moabite family for the difficult life ahead of her as a widow. But as we know, Ruth, the other daughter-in-law, refused to stay in Moab. So she and Naomi traveled to Israel, and at the end of chapter 1, they had arrived there. Naomi was going home, but Ruth was not. Ruth was going into a foreign country. She was the immigrant in the story who had to adjust to a new country, perhaps a new language, I would think so, and a whole new way of living. So the second part of this story comes in chapter 2, and just like in chapter 1, if you look at it as literature in a way, it's a carefully and deliberately told story. And like in chapter 1, you have an introductory part, then you have a key dialogue that goes on, and then you have a kind of concluding section. But I want us to first notice the very first line. It kind of threw me for a little bit as I was thinking about it. I don't think it really fits. It says that Naomi has a kinsman, that is, a relative, through her husband's side of the family, a man whose name was Boaz. Well, we as readers, and maybe the ones who first heard the story, it's good for them to know that and to be introduced to that idea, because in Jewish culture, relatives had responsibilities and opportunities to, in fact, take care of and even benefit from caring for their other relatives who might be widowed. So the writers decided to tell us this right at the start so we can guess that Boaz is going to play a huge role in this story. And because Ruth is mentioned in the very next verse, I sort of assume, well, she knows about Boaz. But actually the text would say she doesn't. She probably doesn't know anything about Boaz or the significance of having a kinsman of her mother-in-law in the area and be part of the story. So anyway, I don't think she knows. I think she's quite ignorant of it. It's not clear either that she knows that it is customary in Israelite society for the relatives of your deceased husband to look after you and maybe even to marry you. In some cases that was actually practiced quite seriously, quite often. Okay, well, let's go back to the story. I've kind of thrown us off here because that little digression. But anyway, Ruth asks her mother-in-law if she could go and glean. That is, to gather up what the reapers leave behind. It's the task for those who are poor, who have no land, no crops to harvest. It was a custom going back to the days of Moses and a way to provide for those who did not have land or a means of income. And Ruth, even though she was not an Israelite, went to do this for her mother-in-law to help them both survive. I thought about gleaning. Even yesterday, I have a community garden plot, and it's supposed to be all cleared out by October 1st. So yesterday was a nice day. Saturday, clean up the garden plot. And what I noticed is that, and I did this too, some of those little potatoes are the ones that were green on one side. No, I just left them there, right? They'll get tilled in and they'll be fine. And some people had left little tomatoes or carrots that were kind of misshapen or where the gophers had bitten off the tops and just left it. You know, if you were really poor and you didn't have enough money for food, you would glean what was in our gardens. In other words, you'd pick up those little tomatoes, those very small potatoes, carrots that were partly eaten, and you could make food out of that. You could make a meal out of that. That's what gleaning is. Okay, so Ruth is off to glean. At the end of verse 3, we're told that she happened to glean in a field that belonged to Boaz. Now, it's not clear to us that the rest of this... Now, it is clear to us right away. The rest of this story is going to be about Ruth and Boaz. We've already been told Boaz is a kinsman. So now we have the next introductory section. If you have your Bibles, you can see it in verse 4 to 7. Here we learn about Boaz. We've already know something about Ruth. Now we've been told there is a Boaz, but now we learn about him. What does he do? He greets his workers, and they greet him. The Lord be with you. The Lord bless you, they say. So he's got obviously a good relationship with his workers, and if his words were sincere, and we have every reason to believe that they were, he's also a man of faith. Secondly, he's observant. He notices a woman who is gleaning whom he does not know. He asks about her. This tells us he was someone who was both observant and thoughtful. And then it is that Boaz initiates a conversation that is at the heart of the story. Just as in chapter 1, the conversation between the main characters tells us what is the most important. It tells us the thoughts of the most important people in the story and reveals their choices, and I would say reveals the intentions of their heart. In chapter 1, the conversation was between Naomi and her two daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth, right? And they go back and forth, the discussion. Here it is between Boaz and Ruth. So let's get straight to that story. Verses 8 and 9, Boaz speaks first. There's 5 things he says to Ruth. Now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one. 2, keep close to my young women. 3, keep your eyes on the field that is being reaped and follow behind them. 4, I have ordered the young men not to bother you. 5, if you get thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn. Now, this is, in my mind, I think, way more than what you might expect to hear from a typical landowner who's coming to check on the harvest. I suspect most landowners would not have even noticed a stranger gleaning in the field, much less asked about them or singled them out for a conversation, and then specifically arranged for them to have a good gleaning experience. I don't think they would have gone out of their way to provide for the safety from harassment, or offered them water to drink. Boaz did not have to do this, except that he's a good man. He's generous and thoughtful. And Ruth is the recipient of his attention and kindness. So how does Ruth respond? Verse 10. This is the back and forth, right? She fell prostrate with her face to the ground and said to him, Why have I found favor in your sight, that you should take notice of me when I am a stranger? First thing, she's bowing down to him, right? Ruth is humble. She asks why he even noticed her. And then she adds something that the writer makes clear again and again in this story. She says, I'm a foreigner. Well, he probably had figured that one out. But anyway, she makes it clear. And the story makes it clear because it's said a number of times. Actually, in verse 2, we had already been told Ruth was a Moabite. And then when the reapers told Boaz about her, they said, well, you know, Ruth is a Moabite. And here Ruth says, I'm a foreigner. Whenever something is repeated in a Bible text, I pay attention because almost always it is repeated because it is very important. It's one of the really important things to keep in mind. The continual reference to her foreignness is designed to make it very clear that what is happening is unusual and it's significant. It's not just any two people talking right now. It's a respectable, righteous man conversing and caring for a stranger. And Boaz's next words make this even clearer to what he already had said in verses 8 and 9. Now he says to her in verse 11 and 12, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. What a statement. It's just brimming with faith and confidence in God. And he makes it very clear that's his conviction. And he is commending Ruth to the care of God. He's a good man, Boaz. He's a compassionate man. He's a godly man. And he knows her story. He knows all about what she has done in regard to coming to Israel and coming with her mother-in-law. Well, how did he know this? We don't know for sure, but we know already the head of the reapers told him something, but I suspect he has asked further. Or he has recalled a story that was told in the gate and couldn't figure out, okay, that's who they were talking about. Now he's put two and two together. I'm not sure. But he's personally interested in Ruth. He is determined to care for her fully. And Ruth responds, this is the second time she responds, again with grace and humility. And then, by the way, she again points out that she doesn't deserve this because she's not one of his servants. Listen to what she says, verse 13. Then she said, may I continue to find favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, even though I am not one of your servants. So again, Ruth is gracious. She's humble. And she actually is kind of making herself vulnerable by saying, like, this means a lot to me. This means a lot to me. You've comforted me. You've spoken kindly to me. It's a compliment she gives to Boaz. She lets him know it means something. And again, she points out the fact, I'm not one of your servants. I'm an immigrant after all. And she's kind of surprised and grateful for what Boaz has said and done. And now Boaz does respond once more. And just listen to this. And remember, he's dealing with a foreign woman who is a lowly gleaner whom he has not met before. At least that's the way the story would seem to me. It's all happening on the same day. At mealtime, Boaz said this, "Come here. Eat some of this bread, dip your morsel in the summer wine." So she sat beside the reapers. He heaped up for her some parched grain. She ate until she was satisfied. She had some left over. When she got up to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, "Let her glean even among the standing sheaves, and do not reproach her. You must also pull out some handfuls for her from the bundles, and leave them for her to glean, and do not rebuke her." What we saw of Moses in the earlier verses is the same now. If anything, he's even more generous. He invited her to eat with the landowner, and with him as the landowner, and with the reapers, who actually were above her in status. He said, "No, come on up. Come on up." Then he says to the young men, again, "You treat her well. And then actually, leave some extra grain." This is above and beyond, isn't it? Now the story moves, the conversation ends. We've had those interactions. Boaz, Ruth, Boaz. Now it moves to the conclusion in verse 17. The gleaning's over. She's had a meal with the landowner and the reapers. She returns home to her mother-in-law. She separates the wheat from the chaff. She shares it with Naomi. And it is only now, I think, that Ruth finds out who Boaz is, and that he's a close relative of her deceased father-in-law. He's a close relative of Naomi's. Well, actually close to the relative of her late husband, Elimelech, but that's how they did their connections, familial connections. So he's a relative. Now, I don't know if, again, does she put two and two together? Does she know the fact that that's a very significant thing? He is going to do something. He might do something for you, right? Well, that may be something new to Ruth. We don't know. It's not clear that she thought of what this might mean, but Naomi, I am sure, she knew. She knew it was customary in the Jewish society for close relatives to marry a widow of his relative and to provide for them. But actually, that's all in chapter 3. And I'm not preaching on chapter 3. So, you'll have to wait till I preach on chapter 3, or else you can, of course, read it ahead for yourself. But let me go back then. Like, what are we to make of this story for us? Well, it seems to me the biggest and most important aspects of this story are the character of Boaz and Ruth. As I've already said, Boaz is kind, generous, thoughtful, concerned, and he makes this clear by his words and actions. If he is drawn to her romantically, we might like to think, oh yeah, he's falling in love with her. The Bible doesn't say us anything like that. Anyway. He simply, in my mind, is a good man. And he is going out of his way to be generous. And Ruth is humble, gracious, hardworking, and she is exactly doing what she said she would back in Moab. She said, "Your people will be my people," and she's acting that out. She takes care of her mother-in-law. She goes out to glean rather than to rely on Naomi to find a way to provide for their needs. So what I think we have in this story, what I'm convinced we have in this story, is an illustration of the way God intends people to live. And one of those ways in which they lived, and it was actually there in the Hebrews passage that was read earlier, and that's to be generous. Boaz is generous in his attention to Ruth. He makes sure she has lots to glean. He provides for her physical needs while working, like food and drink. Ruth is generous with what she has gleaned, and actually, she shares it with Naomi. So often in the Bible, when we read about generosity, it is attributed to God, but often it comes through people. God works through people, we participate, and we are the hands and heart of God when we are generous. Those in need are provided for by God, working through us. And the other thing that was clear to me here, God honors the humble. Ruth is the clear example here because she never once in this chapter demands help. She's never pushy with getting what she needs. She humbly gleans, humbly speaks to Boaz. She emphasizes, I'm a stranger, I'm a foreigner. I'm not worthy of this kind of attention. And Boaz, in his own way, is humble and respectful. He doesn't make demands of Ruth. He doesn't offer her help in a mean and condescending kind of way. He doesn't seem to be looking for how this relationship will benefit him. He's looking to do the right thing before God and before his workers. So in that sense, this story is about ordinary human people. They're not saints or so holy that we feel like, well, I could never be like that. No, I think this story is inspiring precisely because it is about people like you and I. It's possible for us to also be generous and humble. And it is our calling, actually, I think, our task, to be like them, and in that way, we too will be serving God. I leave you with that. Amen.